Hi, we're Option Conservation, and this is the Shoe Room Sessions.
So I was being interviewed by Sky News yesterday. So we were having we had 6 hours filming and trying to explain that actually the policy dictated grow food everywhere.
Yeah.
And actually in places where it was just really challenging, but because the incentive didn't matter what you did with it or what you produced. So this whole transition to payment for public goods.
Yep.
Actually farmers really have to evaluate where they can grow sensible, profitable food, because if you've got an acre in the field that doesn't produce food, it detracts from the total yield of the rest of the field. So when we see wheat plateauing at 8.5 tons a hectare, but if you take that acre out that is only producing 2 tons a hectare, then the rest of your yield increases.
It's funny because something that would be an obvious consideration in a different type of business. Well, it's a hangover of the subsidy system,
No, it is.
And I think,
but it's like it's a scrub and wet and water. The policy said we don't like it, so that's why we removed it. We used to have something called field corner management.
Okay, say more.
Which was a part of the government Pillar 2 stewardship option, where you would leave a corner of a field to develop and do whatever it wants. So everything that you guys are all about. But if any scrub appeared on it, you had to cut it down because you didn't qualify for the payment.
People seem to forget what the word subsidy means.
Well, farmers are very adamant at the moment that actually the new regime isn't a subsidy, it's an incentive,
right,
that costs them money. So when they do their cover crops, it costs £80 a hectare to buy the seed and put it in place, whereas before you just got £200 a hectare for doing whatever you wanted.
I mean, historically, anything that had a subsidy in place, by definition, needed it because the system didn't work. But
governments wanted to provide people with cheap food.
Completely agreed. But there was almost a suggestion that in itself was sustainable, but economically it never was. Otherwise, the subsidy wouldn't be required. So that's why because it was. I was in the Environment Agency when Michael Gove started talking about the public money for public good. That was when it was almost like a veil was lifting, like, okay, that makes sense. That's something that, yes, it's evolved and adjusted over time, but at the point to which it was first offered, it felt like that was something that had the potential to unite everybody because no one was disagreeing with that. Everyone
was fully supportive of Gove's initiative, and all designed by Dieter Helm. Although some of his principles didn't, the polluter pays principles kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah.
And it's just been lost in the transition, 6 secretaries of state in 6 years?
Yeah.
All with a slight difference of opinion. And then we have geopolitical stuff.
And some legitimately insane.
Couldn't possibly comment.
I can. Yeah, I've had meetings with them where they've displayed that behaviour. We should probably tell people who you are and what you do before we dive into the conversation.
So I'm Jake Fiennes. I'm the Director of Conservation for Holkham Estate. Holkham Estate is a 10,000 hectare private land holding on the North Norfolk coast. It's predominantly food production, so combinable crops and roots. But we do have 3,000 hectares of National Nature Reserve, which is SSI, SAC, SPA, Ramsar Natura 2000, visited by 1 million people.
We'll put a link to our glossary of each of those acronyms at the top of this podcast, please.
And then we have 1,000 hectares of woodland, mainly much of it designed landscape woodland rather than semi-ancient natural. We have a 200-year-old pine plantation on top of a sand dune, which Natural England says is a sand dune with a invasive species on, but the Forestry Commission say it's a woodland.
Interesting. What do you think it is?
When you have a SSI condition assessment of your sand dune, it's unfavourable because it's got a 200-year-old pine wood on it, which in turn has rare species within it, bizarrely. So,
would it still be a sand dune in the absence of the sort of binding effect of the? I remember
so much of it. So there is 170 hectares of this dune complex is pine wood, but there's probably another 200 hectares of dynamic sand dunes and fixed sand dunes. So
fascinating. How on earth did you get there? Can you tell us your career arc of story?
So I left school at 16, went to work for a nightclub in London.
Did you like school?
I didn't perform well at school
Because
because I went to 13 different schools. And didn't start school till I was 7 and left at 16. So
it's going to be a challenge.
it was quite
Yeah,
challenging.
I wasn't a fan of school either, but mainly because I went to a terrible one. Perhaps I should have tried more. Both tried more at school and tried more schools, but 13 sounds like a challenge.
But it's actually what it does. It teaches you to build relationships very quickly.
Friends who have had military backgrounds said very similar. You have to develop those relationships at speed.
So that's something that I continue in my career. So because I can speak to farmers, I can speak to environmentalists, I can speak to policymakers, and everyone's comfortable with I don't threaten anyone, but I try to give them solutions to move forward. So
That's rare. Often people are comfortable in the boardroom or in the field. It's rare to do both.
yeah, so and I think my schooling probably helped with that. So left school at 16, went to work for a nightclub. That wouldn't have worked out. I wouldn't be here today if I continued that. I then rang up a friend.
Hard lifestyle?
Pretty tough.
Yeah.
Well, no, it was amazing.
Partying hard.
Yeah. And then, so I rang up a friend who had inherited 3,500 acres in Sussex and said, can I come down for the weekend? And I stayed there for 5 years.
What was it about the place or the experience that grabbed
The
you?
experience was learning everything about a private rural estate and everything and all of the challenges, and whether it's woodland, whether it's a game interest, whether it's dairy farming, some of the landlord-tenant relationships. So he gave me a wonderful breadth of experience moving around different departments, trying to diversify, trying to make money, having problems with commodity prices and poor yields. So that was a great education for the start of my career.
So do you think it was the learning, the subject matter, or both?
It's both. I've always had a natural. I've always had a natural drawing to the environment, so it just gave me a better understanding of how that works.
So I read a lot now, but I came to that very late. Like I didn't read a book for pleasure until I was like 30.
I didn't read a book till I wrote a book.
I almost had that. So we launched my first book. The event was at the start of June, and I was sat ready to do the opening at this book launch, and I suddenly realised I've never been to a book launch before. This is my first one. How are you supposed to do these things? So
Interesting. So my book was published 3 years ago, and a mate of mine who's a 3-star Michelin chef said, as a gift, can I do the food? Anyway, it turns out that most book launches food's really crap.
Yeah.
So it's like peanuts and crisps. So actually we had quite a good spread.
I'm so glad you hadn't told the team that beforehand, because it would have been very expensive if I'd had to try and compete like that. But I came to the reading really late, and it was only when I had a forum to apply the learning from reading that I learned to love it. So I don't read fiction, but I read business books and leadership books and strategy and marketing and conservation and land use and anything that can give me an edge or an opportunity to apply to the business. But without that application, I didn't enjoy the learning.
I have a similar sort of bookshelf. So it's things I can learn from, ideas I can possibly apply, or ideas I can go, no, I'm not even going to touch.
And is it all quite closely related to the sort of environment or land sector, or do you pull ideas from different forums and arenas and apply them?
I think it's mainly the land sector. If I look at whether it's Wilding, whether it's Ben McDonald's books, whether it's
he did one of the keynotes for us at the book launch.
I saw a snapshot of his. Yeah. Whether it's Simon Barnes, who I find amusing and I find his writing quite easy to read. Cocker, Reed Banks. So it's kind of that sort of genre.
What we perhaps do a little bit differently. So I draw a lot in from high performance sport, and I came out of uni 2008, just as the sort of Silicon Valley tech companies were really starting to pop, and I went and spent quite a bit of time in the US playing sport over there. So my approach to building and running a business is very much influenced by that. So a lot of our ideas are pulled from Silicon Valley or from high-level sports teams, which is unusual for the environment sector. So it's those two parts plus the sort of environmental world to a lesser depth than you haven't described. But that's what creates the sort of unique melting pot that is the OC culture.
Yeah.
So 4 years on that estate?
4 years on that estate. Then I went to Australia because my father said, you've got to go to Australia. So I worked on sheep and cattle stations. and just moved around Australia. I was a cowboy effectively. And then my mother was taken ill, so I moved back to the UK and
How
went
long in Australia?
2 years.
Okay.
Outstayed my visa by a bit, but anyway, I'm not know whether the Australians let me back in or not. I'm not sure. And then so I then went back to the same estate because I said any chance I need a job. So I was there for a couple of years, and then the guy who owned it got married. So it's kind of like when you're living in the same house, it's sort of best to move out. So I moved out. And then I did a brief spell as a gamekeeper on an estate in Wales, and it rains the whole time, so I didn't enjoy
It
that.
does rain the whole time, yeah.
And then I came to my father recognised that I wasn't really enjoying Wales, so he managed to put me in contact with someone who owns 5,500 acres in South Norfolk. So I went there as a gamekeeper on a wild bird shoot. So wild bird shoot is all about managing habitats to provide habitats and invertebrates for chick food 365 days a year for grey partridge and pheasant. So you start to learn about ecosystems and how they function and how you can. So that's the joy of doing that sort of work. And in my 24 years there, I started there as the underkeeper and left there as the estate manager. And that enabled me, with the government incentives that were around the start of agri-environment, to really push to have food and farming working with each other. And then I used to take school children around to kind of, get them into a wildflower meadow and pick flowers and don't worry about it and look at spiders and everything that I enjoyed as a child. And then I realised actually the whole policy is changing. So I then got institutional landowners and government policymakers to come and visit. I was then asked to join the Glover Review.
Why reach up and out, and why invite people in? Because often I hear from private landowners and those working for them that no, this is ours. I don't want to deal with the hassle of others coming in. Why did you feel the draw to say no, the doors are open, come and see?
Because you need to demonstrate what you're doing. You need to say, well, this is what's possible. This is, and everything about how in the reduction in nature and biodiversity that we've seen over decades, how can we be the generation to start to make things better? Can we grow food and have nature at the same time? Yes, of course we can. Can we have nature that is prioritized over food? Yes, of course we can. So how can you demonstrate a range of approaches that provide the benefits for everything you're trying to deliver on? So that's why you need to, when Gove came in and we were talking about exiting Europe, and how we were going to create our own agricultural bill and our own environmental bill, that was a time where you can help influence those that are creating the policies.
You talked about it there in terms of the level of decline in nature. Over your years in the sector, have you seen that firsthand? Have you
Yeah.
seen that decline?
Yeah. We recorded, as an example, when I first arrived in South Norfolk, we recorded 22 territories of turtle dove. We made more space for nature, yet the turtle dove numbers reduced by 90%.
Why do you think that is?
That was disease, that's hunting pressure on their migration, and lack of food in their breeding. So it's multiple factors, and we've already seen how turtle doves are starting to increase. Interestingly, the hunting pressure has reduced because there's been a voluntary ban in some of the European countries. So the western flyaway population has started to see an increase. So there's, and sometimes we've done things the same way all the time, and that's how we've always done it. Actually, we might need to reevaluate that.
There's an amazing lady called Annabel Thomas who founded a distillery called Knockneen on the west coast of Scotland. It's the only net zero certified whiskey distillery up there. And at the time when her and her family founded it, she was the only female founder of a whiskey distillery. She says her biggest red flag she can ever hear from a person or a business is, we've always done it that way. It's like if she hears that from a business, she thinks you're done because you're only moving backwards. And that's someone coming from the whiskey industry, which is as traditional as it gets.
No, there's growing population, climate change, biodiversity loss. We need to do things differently, and we need. There's been some. The Glover Review that I was on, trying to the 24% of land that is designated for national parks and national landscapes. How can we? they were in their original purposes. There was no nature purpose there.
People are so surprised. I use that line a lot, and people are so surprised when they hear that. They're like, "Well, of course there was. No. This was just outdoor space for people in cities. That's all
Well,
it tried to be."
It was trying to keep our green and present land for the men that went to war. So when they came back, the landscapes that they remembered were still there, but actually nature wasn't part of that.
I mean, that is not a moral or a philosophically it's not a negative thing to hope to achieve for people. That makes perfect sense in time. I don't know when we started recording cameras, but you and I spoke a little about incentives and things before. And at the time to which a decision's made, it can make absolute perfect sense. So post-war, of course, we were trying to produce every element of food we could, and that was absolutely the right decision. But we held on to that for so long in a world that didn't need to be behaving in that way any longer.
And where we see the slight frustration with the regularly used sentence of "we are one of the most nature depleted countries in the world," slightly unhelpful, because it's going back 300 years and trying to compare England with Tanzania. But actually, what we have seen since the 1970s, which is some of the environmental organisations have been recording, BTO being one of them, we've seen some of the greatest declines in our biodiversity through the intensification and the policies of agriculture. So that's where we have the opportunity to change and readdress that. And I think, so you had the Glover Review, which talks about national landscapes. You have the Descriptor Review that talks about how we put a price on nature, which is really, because when I talk to some of my team, actually, we've got to put a price on it. No, it's free. But actually it's free, but it's in decline. And it's our it's our lungs, so it's our responsibility to build it back up.
I find that some people have a moral aversion to the idea of putting a value on the environment. I find the concept of not so offensive, it's ridiculous. Because if you do not value something, you are inherently saying it is worthless. And the way we keep score as a society is capitalism. People might have some better solutions. We haven't found one yet. So if you say something is worth zero, that's the cause of nature decline. That's the cause of climate change.
But it's the fiscal value. So the wagtail, how much is that worth? So in my book, I talk about the value of the lapwings that are nesting on a field that is destined for potatoes. The gross margin on a hectare of potatoes is about £2,500. Where's the value of the lapwing? How do you compare? The government incentive for creating areas for lapwings to breed in arable land is about £500 a hectare. So immediately potatoes win.
They do.
So that's something.
The nature part of it is way harder. I think that's why. So conceptually, it's easier. I think if you're comparing nature and carbon markets, I think to the person on the street, nature having a value and it is easier to think about than the idea of carbon is to start with, because it's invisible.
Carbon's really boring.
Well, but it is easier to commodify in terms of the simplicity of it. So they've boiled it down to a ton of carbon. Here's a unit price. We aren't quite there for a lapwing versus an eagle.
No, but I think in the discussions I'm having quite recently is actually we have charismatic carbon, we have carbon plus, we have something that has a nature value associated to it. So we know that there was a trade recently done for a carbon price of £100 because there was nature associated to it, and there was a brand compatibility.
Shout out to our friends at Nattergal, hell of a job, well done. Awesome project.
I was going to name drop.
No, I always do. Our rule on the podcast is we want to elevate every other business and company. So Rebalance Earth, Restore, Great Yellow, Nattergal, all appeared, and that's the way to go. And collectively, every victory anyone has is one for the sector and puts another price on it. I'm really interested in, I can hear your passion for the environment, your connection. You've literally spent time on the land working with it and people in there. How did you transition from doing that to being comfortable being involved in high-level government reviews, which are inherently bureaucratic, and they're more like the schooling system we talked about than they are being on the land? How did you manage to work in those two different ways?
So, yes, my early career was in the field, seeing the impacts that we were having, but also seeing the possibilities of making a difference. So I started on 3,500 acres, went to 5,500 acres, and now I'm on 25,000 acres. So the only way to go bigger and better is to help shape the policy so that it can happen at scale. So, and if you when you sit in those rooms with policymakers and politicians, actually, if you can give real life personal experiences and you can demonstrate options to make positive benefits, it's amazing how they listen. So, you know, on the Parks Review, my purpose was to talk about nature. And I can actually talk about things that I've put in place where I've seen a difference. And if we can create policies that recognize the uplift in nature and people are rewarded, you're going to see, you know, if I look, so with this current administration, which they put a halt to environmental payments, whether it's SFI, whether it's countryside stewardship, higher tier, whether it's landscape recovery. From my perspective, I'll pay people if they deliver something. So this farm you now own, I came here about 4 years ago, where a guy that was working with something with DEFRA on a pilot for payment by results. So he was paid, if he delivered more, he would get a higher incentive. It's, you know, it's quite easy to achieve. So if
Doesn't sound unusual in any other business, right?
It is, well, normally, because if you start to get better results and you improve, actually you get the rewards from the private market rather than the public purse.
Correct.
So I think that there is an opportunity, if we can get a consensus of agreement on how we measure nature, then we can start to track people's performance. So I've created a tool at Holkham, and we use it to measure before we change our interventions or our management style. And that's basically, it's a natural capital tool. So it's soil, water, air, biodiversity, and landscape value. And it's nice and simple, using metrics that already exist. So transects, quadrats, soil depth and soil organic matter, worm counts. And we're trying to create a tool that anyone can use. So it doesn't need to be a qualified ecologist. It can be any land managers. Because if the people on the ground start to see the difference, then we start to build back nature. So we're currently, I was asked to apply for an award with Rolex for their laureate award, which is currently in the submission. We're hoping to get funding to make this tool a live tool that is free to use. For
Literally the Rolex of natural capital tools. That's a branding treat, isn't it?
Well, let's see. It's with them. But I'm also working with Bramble Intelligence and Soil Association Exchange to try to create a land managers platform so they can see the benefit of their actions.
It's a really exciting time for the development of those type of tools and techniques, because we're working on two different pilot projects in Scotland in a similar vein. The one I'm closest to is the work Kane Blythe and Credit Nature are doing. I don't know if you're cited on that. Yeah. So Kane's been on the podcast, love what they're doing, and they're getting some real traction with the Scottish government there. And that has the potential to revolutionise how we think about nature up there as well. So,
well, I sent my Rolex slide deck to Mary Craig's Minister of Nature, so we'll see if government. But I've also showed it to the supply chains, Marks and Spencers, Waitrose, Morrison's, Natural England, DEFRA Civil Service team, and they're all everyone I show it to is really enthusiastic about it. It's just making it happen. So I just need a philanthropist to give me a few £100,000 and we can create something that's free for everyone.
Well, where the government are at the minute, hopefully they'll see the value and push the button on that as well.
Touch wood.
Nice. If it hadn't been, was the strategic work a key part of you making the step across to Holkham?
So Lord Leicester rang me up. It was a bizarre journey heading to the NFU's headquarters at Stoneleigh. And we had a meeting where there was a farmer who was losing all his cattle through TB. There's another farmer who was a tenant farmer whose landlord was selling up and was going to lose his tenancy. On the way back, I get a call from the Duke of Norfolk sounding me out about a nature writer, Mark Cocker. And then Lord Leicester rings me up and says, would you be interested in this position? You know, I'm managing one of the largest privately owned national nature reserves that is rich in salt marsh and woodland and sand dune and freshwater marsh. And that was a real privilege, but also within my role, I oversee game, I oversee forestry, and I influence farming. But because I was already doing stuff, external stuff, Holkham were happy to take me on because they recognised that I had quite a nice address book.
When you were processing that opportunity, what are the sort of things that were informing your decision? Because you had a great role already. For people early in their career who are looking between opportunities, when do you know it's the right one to make the next step?
I think I was ready to move. When you've been somewhere for a long time and you've tried to, and you've made changes and you've proved a point. So can you do that somewhere else? Can you go somewhere and actually say, I can replicate this? Because if you have a track record of replicating it, and working with nature can be wonderful, it could be a real bastard. So, because it doesn't necessarily do what you want all the time, but actually that
That's going to make an amazing short. Nature can be a real bastard.
but it doesn't. But actually, sometimes nature likes it rough, and if you treat it rough and you start processes again, you get outcomes that you wouldn't expect. But it's not necessarily the outcome you want. So, having a larger canvas to work on and being able to implement change and make a difference and track that changes. So the guys on the ground, my wardens on the nature reserve, when I arrived, I said, can you drive me around the perimeter of every field? So I got on the truck with the first guy. He went diagonally straight across. I said, I'm not going to get a feel for this place if you do that. Because I need to, when you've managed land for a long time, you can get a feel for it. I don't need to, if I can drive down the road and say, that's a good wildflower meadow and that's not, just by looking at it from 100 yards at 30 miles an hour. So I get it. You get a sense of the place, then you get the opportunities. So it's a wetland. So what do you want to do to make a wetland better? You make it wet. What do you do to make a wetland more heterogeneric? You actually allow reeds to build up and you allow a bit more diversity in the sward and you change the grazing regime. So we implemented changes, and then instead of the wardens emptying dog poo bins, all they did was concentrate on monitoring, recording and managing nature, or guiding nature. Nature manages itself if you allow it to. And we can see in my close to 7 years there, we can see a whole range of species increase. We can see habitat adaptation for species migration. So the first cattle egrets bed at Holkham in Norfolk. We see great white egrets, spoonbill, now thriving. We see 30 of the white-tailed eagles that have been released in the Isle of Wight visiting our site. So you now have a site that is, the skies are full of a range of species from red kites to buzzards to marsh harriers. On the ground, you've got lapwing and curlew and redshank breeding or residing. So the Ramsar designation is based on overwintering populations. So in peak wintering season, we'll have 200,000 birds on site, and that's a spectacle in itself. So if you can. And then you engage with people. So the main car park, which has spaces for about 400 cars, when you arrived, it used to say, welcome to the car park. It now says, welcome to the nature reserve. But if it says, welcome to the nature reserve and no one sees any nature, they're not going to respect it. So when they get out of their cars and you've got 10,000 pink-footed geese flying over your head so you can't hear what your friend is saying, you engage people with nature. So we put in seasonal dog restrictions on the beach where shorebirds have, the data showed us that shorebirds were having a tough time. Last year we saw the highest breeding attempt for little terns, where we excluded 20% of the beach from beachgoers, but also put in seasonal dog restrictions. And when we put in the seasonal dog restrictions, I get phone calls from all sorts of other nature reserves and institutional land owner organisations saying, what did you do? I said, I talked to people. We had a 12-week consultation, said, this is what we're going to do. What do you think? The results from that consultation said, we give you the mandate to put those restrictions in place. And then the first thing...
Would you have done it anyway if they hadn't?
When you construct a survey, if you put the right questions, you get the answers you want.
Did you ever see the Yes Minister episode on that?
Yeah,
I love that. Ask the question the right way and you'll get the answer. Yeah.
Okay. Interestingly, when we had the consultation for the Parks Review, which is 24% of England, we had 2,000 responses. When I put a consultation for dog restrictions on Holkham Beach, I get 3,000 responses. So it's very close to people's hearts. So we employ beach wardens 7 days a week. They're not the dog police; they're to guide people, to explain what's going on. And then I took out
That's not without significant overhead, though, right? So you're picking up a cost associated with those individuals.
Yep.
Okay.
and yeah, the bulk of my income for the reserve is government support, and that's been a bit difficult. Bizarrely, in this transition period, who's lost out in government support? It's nature. So I put a budget together at the start of the year with a loss of £50,000. We had a bit of a sort of a bit of a change in that, with government reviewing some of the agri-environment payments in the last few weeks. So I might run at a break even. I only want to have, it's not a profit centre, it's about managing a landscape, and I will do what I need to do that, and that's employing and spending thousands of pounds employing people to go and talk to people and explain what's going on. So I was with a film crew yesterday, and we went out on the beach, and when you get to a site that has signage that says beware of breeding birds, or a map to guide you where you can take your dog and where you can't, and the signage gets stronger the closer you get to the sensitive areas, to the last sign, which basically says,
Yeah, it's like we don't mind an F-bomb. I drop the occasional one. How
so then people then see it. And when you see, so we've got currently an estimated 70 pairs of little terns breeding there. So they can see there's a load of fences and cordons and signs, but actually there's also nature. So then they doubly respect it. Because sometimes you see conservation area keep out, and you go there and go, well, what's there? There's nothing there. So actually, you then get that support from the public. And the first thing we, at the end of the seasonal restrictions, the first thing we do is we thank those responsible dog owners for enabling this to happen.
What's your mechanism of doing that?
Through socials.
Okay. Signage is a really interesting one as a landowner. So I think the majority of signage on estates is ugly and ineffective. How do you make the decision about when you do put signage in, and the visible appearance of that? Is there an overall style brand strategy that Holkham has so that it's in keeping?
So we talk that through. So you want to speak, you want to connect with dog owners. So what you don't do is you don't put a picture of a fluffy chick, because they're not going to engage it. So we have the sign that says, we call it the fluffy dogs sign, because it's someone walking a cuddly pooch along a beach. Immediately they're drawn to that, and it says dog restrictions, please keep your dogs on leads between X and Y. And when we put the signage up, and it's a bit sign heavy, and I don't like, but I have to get, I'm very adamant I have to get a message out. And it suddenly dawned on me, actually, what we haven't done is we haven't thanked people. So in retrospect, we then put all these signs, and as they all exit, there's a seal or there's a little tern chick, and just thank you for helping and protecting nature.
That's quite clever.
So then people feel like they've experienced something, they feel rewarded.
Come across it's a marketing psychologist called Rory Sutherland. I need to send you, I think you'd like his book. It's called Alchemy. He talks about how the highest end restaurants, there isn't a sign that you walk in the door that says, turn your phone off. But there is a sign on the way out that says, thank you for, you may now put your phone back on.
Yeah.
So they walk in and you'll turn to put your coat away or whatever, and you'll see that, oh wait, I should turn my sign off. I turn my phone off. But it's that nudge and prompt in the other way. I really like that two sides.
Being subtle.
It is.
And I think people, fuck off my land signs are really unhelpful.
Doesn't mean the change that you deliver. So you mentioned the dog one, which is a great one, but you've got, over your career, you have a legacy and a history of delivering change in how land is managed. And how has your way of thinking about land changed since you first walked onto your friend's estate to now?
It's about creating a balance. It's, so before Ukraine, and the nature values were quite high, and they were quite in everyone's central vision. And then Ukraine came, and we just,
that post-COVID gap.
Yeah.
I think we'd seen such an acceleration of that because people have been locked away from their environment. All of a sudden, they miss what they don't have anymore. Doors opened, and we seem to have the best engaged population in terms of nature issues that I'd certainly remembered.
But we saw with Ukraine and COVID, we saw the dial slightly go more focused on food, self-sufficiency, food security. And we just need to bring that back. It needs to be, they are both equal. They have equal priorities, and we just need to, I think I was at the launch of the land use framework consultation, and I think that's really helpful.
Do you? Unpick that for me. Why do you think a land use framework's helpful?
Depending on how, when the Secretary of State says it's going to be a tool that will help guide your decisions. And interestingly, so at the conference there was a map of 1823 of Sussex. So I looked on the map because I know a part of Sussex reasonably well, and the land use designation on that map in Edu was basically scrub and woodland. So that's an estate 35 miles south of central London, and they've repurposed that land to exactly what it should be. But there are other parts of the country, you know, when you go through the Fiennes, and I know the whole peat issue is problematic, but actually the ability to produce high quality, high yielding food at scale, we need to understand that. And then we need to understand how we create the balance of both. And part of my conversations, part of my conversations yesterday, where I look at hard-ass farmed land that makes no space for nature, then I go on to high-value nature, which makes very little space for food and farming, but we use the food and farming tool to help us increase nature. So the wilding thing and the use of herbivores and pigs and ponies, my pitch to farmers is that's agriculture. You know, the wonderful fields of flowers that you see are hay meadows. That's agriculture. So you can get everyone feel they're part of the conversation without feel threatened by different land uses. And then we have areas that need to be high value nature. You know, there are a lot of calls recently about changing the UNESCO World Heritage status of Cumbria. That's a challenge because it's a landscape that has over centuries been created through grazing regimes. And how can it's about trying to create that balance. We also need to be very conscious of tradition and cultures and communities. So it's
No one will ever define those, though.
no, it's nice words, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Local, community, tradition, culture. How long? What does it mean? Where? When? It's impossible to. So I wrote a piece about the elasticity of the word local. I was once told that local related to anyone who'd ever been to a place or might. And I was like, how would one go about consulting with someone who might go to a place? Like,
I was at Chatsworth the other day. They're within 2 hours drive from Chatsworth, 20% of the UK population.
wonderful. I
So
presume we've spoke to all of those, have we?
they're all
Yeah,
local.
exactly. Exactly. So I think that's the challenge. And the Lake District, I think it's a great example of where a designation has perpetually locked that place into ecological despair. Because there's just
then I go and I
too
have a
many
friend of
sheep.
mine farms in the Lake District, just sort of west of Penrith, and I go and see his farm, and he has changed the way he grazes. He has understood where he needs to make space for scrub and woodland and water within his farming system. He can actually now carry more stock. His stock is healthier. He's reduced the need for antibiotics. He's reduced the need for winter feed and forage. So he's actually, and his farm stands out like a beacon. It's unique. So how do you apply that approach? And then you might have, you know, some large estates further.
And economically, is he managing to make that work in a better way than a more traditional hill farm model?
He says he is. I think is if he can carry more stock, and if you look at stock values at the moment, which are quite high,
Yeah.
if he hasn't got feed, med, and med and vet bills,
Yeah.
that makes his life cheap.
We have a partnership farm on Exmoor. One of our estates is a unique model whereby this wasn't our strategy, but we went to visit a farm that was selling 2/3 of the land holding to allow for transition between the generations of the family. And we just fell in love with the family. So we agreed to buy 2/3 of the farm, and we worked with that together. We helped them on the natural capital side. They still farm. It's a mixed farm there. We gave them their first profitable year in so many by just going organic. So the yields were down, they absolutely were, but they saved so much in terms of fertilizer and on cost.
There was an interesting report came out recently that regenerative agriculture, in its many shapes and forms, because it's a set of principles and guidelines,
Yeah.
actually might reduce yield by 1%, but it actually reduces inputs by anything up to between 40 and 60%.
It's funny, isn't it? It's badged and positioned as this wholesome, morally appropriate gift to the world, whereas McKinsey would sell you it as a cost-cutting activity and rebadge it as a different way. So interesting. The point you reference about positioning different landscape interventions as really being agriculture. We're seeing a mirroring of that in the natural capital world. So have you come across Rob Gardner and Ewan Murray at Rebalance Earth, the work they're doing?
Yes. Yeah.
So they both come from a pure financial background. I mean, not by vocation, I suppose. Rob was a glaciologist at uni, but come from financial world into the environment sector, and they're trying to position the natural capital asset based as natural infrastructure, and to give it designations and language that speak to the financial world to make it
So I'm having conversations with them.
perfect.
About a proposal that I've put to Holkham, and some of the conversations that I've had with an event hosted by Nadgam National Trust a few weeks ago, is the problem is we don't speak the right language. So financier goes, "What the fuck's nature?"
Yeah.
And the nature people go, "We just want your money."
Yeah.
And actually, how do we create the 5-slide deck that they understand?
Well, and then I had a fascinating conversation last week with a lady who runs the land banking group in Europe, and I love this sort of convergent evolution when you get these language debates in different countries happening at the same time. Now you've got the Robin Ewan model trying to make the language of natural capital easier to fit into existing financial structures. Because I came from an environmental, a sport, a tech background, I did the exact opposite. So our intention was to say, no, this is different and disruptive. And where that's been really effective is in allowing me to recruit some of the most incredibly talented young people who want to be part of something that is disruptive and different and is change. But it also ruffles those feathers of people who want the normal language. So I feel really lucky that we're at a time in the natural capital sector. So let's part the fact the climate could be in a better state and nature could be in a better state. But this is the most exciting time to be working in land and on natural capital, because there's so many people from different sectors coming up with these unique ideas. We fast forward 10 years, all the big universities will be teaching the same natural capital course. It'll all have been standardized by that point, whereas now is just this hotbed of innovation and ideas and creativity coming across the place. And I've never seen anything like this in my career.
And just, a lot of times, so it's all the voices need to, instead of being someone over there talking one thing, someone actually, it's combining those voices and listening to them. And that's what the Trust and Nattergal, by having a session with the buyers and a session with the sellers, and then having the buyers and the sellers together. And Ewan was actually, when I was having my speed dating was with Ewan. So
Was he wearing a kilt? Okay, he usually is.
So and I said, well, this is my proposal, this is what I want. So the conversation has evolved, and we then had a conversation with someone. So it's constructed wetland. So we then had a conversation with WWT, who are trying to work in this space. So how can we create the slide deck that the financiers, and it is the carbon thing, because the private investors are fundamentally focused on carbon at the moment. But how can we make it carbon positive, nature positive, carbon plus? And water's quite an easy one to do. It's quite an easy sell. I don't want a lot of money, but and I don't need revenue payments. I need capital payments. And we look at philanthropy, but we also conversations with some of the councils and local authorities. It's amazing how there are pots of money that people don't know about, and then it's getting people close to nature, because people are just so.
What if it wasn't the hundreds of thousands that you wanted, and actually you were given the tens of millions? What would you?
It is in the millions, actually.
Okay, so what would you? Let's go with the magic wand approach then. So money, not an object. You get a Bezos-esque benefactor that said, "We've seen your track record of what you delivered for the environment. Here's a blank check. What are you doing to really catalyse and deliver systematic change across the sector?" What would you do with that blank check?
Baseline, monitor, report, verify. I would put a plan in place that it was irreversible change. So I want permanence. So in some of the questions I was sent, that you haven't asked any of them, but anyway, one of the what things have I done that I've regretted? I haven't regretted anything, because I've made change. But my biggest regret is I haven't created enough permanence, because we see the flip-flopping of policies that go for, we've got SFI, that's a 3-year agreement.
And then disappears.
And then disappears. And then the farmers go, we're going to grow food. And, so nature's like really fucking confused, because next minute you're giving me space, then you're taking it all away. So we need to ensure permanence, and permanence is woodland and water. And then, when you use the land use framework and you lose the local nature recovery strategies, which are quite straightforward, really. I know where, we've got chalk streams in North Norfolk. We need to be buffering, protecting those chalk streams. We've got the North Norfolk SSSI is vast, but periodically between it, there are areas of agriculture. They need to be repurposed because we need to do everything that Lawton suggests, which is make them bigger, better and joined.
One of my favourite stats from our portfolio. So we've acquired just over 43,000 acres. We connect to a further 500,000 acres of land that has an aspect of conservation in its stated objectives. I got that stat checked so many times. In terms of that connectivity,
our landscape recovery pilot, bigger, better, wetter for Norfolk, is 5,000 hectares, which will connect 20,000 hectares.
It's amazing.
So, and it's that storytelling.
But it needs to be 50,000 that connects to 200,000, doesn't it? That's why I keep asking the question about if the money that we all ask for in the sector does flow, what are we going to do with it? And my worry is for the investors. I think my experience is they're divided into two camps. One is we want the absolutely stated, measured, monitored, verified, the carbon buyer. The others is no. We want different, ambitious. Where's the systematic change? And I think they're in two camps at the moment.
So I spoke to someone who wanted my opinion on a request for cash from an organisation to a global organisation, and the frustration I have, we all have the sustainability bods within the private sector and within the institutions, is the people that write the checks are the people in the boardroom, and we don't get access to the people in the boardroom to then explain what the aspiration is. But if they will put 200, 300,000 and £500,000 into protecting some mangroves, or we've done a bit of CSR, ESG, we're content with that. How do you get the people of passion who want to deliver in front of those people? Because actually, if you give them something that they can really buy into, the money flows.
We can only speak, I'm hugely privileged to have the most amazing private investment group, but it's been that ambition, that drive, that delivery, that doing something different that has really excited them. Now, we have boards and governance and everything is done at a professional standard, more than I've ever seen in the environment sector before, but it is the point of differentiation, it is the ambition, but I can talk directly, immediately to our investment decision makers.
That comes about to the buyer-seller conversation and the 5-slide deck that needs to be put not in front of the sustainability person that goes all gooey and says this is wonderful, put it in front of the board.
If you think about it though, we're just seeing like these coming next 5 years, we'll see the entire Greta Thunberg generation leave university. We haven't seen them hit big organisations yet. So another 5 to 10 after that, they'll be sat in the C-suite making those decisions.
100%. And there's the people have already talked about that. So those individuals that leave university in the next 3 to 5 years will only work and get their honours degrees, will only want to work with businesses and organisations that have the same value that they are.
We're seeing it now. So our intern, we've done 3 intern programs. So this is our 4th year. Without a website or anything, we had 100 applicants. Then we went to 500. This last year, we had 2,000 applicants. We had 50 Oxbridge firsts, for 5 places across the year for entry-level roles. And these are people that would not have touched the environment sector before. They'd have all gone into law, Big 4 accountancy firms, consulting firms. But they're like, no, I want to be in the environment sector. James is sat at the back of the room. He went back and was like headhunted by like big banks, and he was like, no, can I come back? I want to be part of the environment sector.
And I think so. The environment sector, what it is, the environment sector is evolving into something which is much more than the environment.
It's merging with that's why I probably shouldn't say the environment sector anymore, because we're not. We're natural capital asset management. We're developers and asset managers in that regard. It is fascinating. I had a fascinating call yesterday from one of the leading oil companies saying they had an intention of putting hundreds of millions into natural capital in the UK and couldn't find the scale, the professionalism or the projects to put it into. Why weren't they there yet? We also then had a discussion whether those projects would take funding from that organisation. But it's fascinating that they're saying we want to be in this space. We see it coming.
Well, they do, and that's, if I look, so I sit on the RSPB's income committee, and the RSPB challenges on where its pension funds are invested in, and challenges on who wants to give them money, and is it fossil fuels, and they're kind of, we shouldn't be, that's morally wrong for everything that we're trying to do. But
where do you sit on that debate?
I don't know. I don't know where my pension's invested, so I wouldn't know. Um, um, we need cash to make things happen. We
Yeah.
live in a capitalist society. We need to probably lower our standards to enable change to take place, if I'm honest.
One of my favourite phrases in this entire thing we do is contradictions and compromises. I think a lot of people have let perfect be the enemy of better for a long time. We could have improved things and gone, oh no, it's not the perfect answer. I saw this at the Environment Agency all the time. Let's do another strategy. Let's do another pilot. Couldn't we just do something and learn from it? Exactly.
Actually, but let's talk more action is
Yeah.
really needed. And if we've got cash coming from areas that we're slightly uncomfortable with, if we can start to enact change, we can demonstrate what's possible, you just a snowball effect.
There is, yeah. We very rarely have the luxury of black and white. I do wonder if funding from an oil company is black. I think there's a good chance I'd lose a chunk of the team if we were ever to do a deal of that type. It's really difficult because I'm not sure there is such a thing as good money. And how many years do you go back and look at the origin of funds and where it's gone through? And
well, no, but you can't help that. It's all going to have an association with fossil fuels, everything.
Yeah,
because our whole lives revolve around fossil fuels.
Yeah, or tobacco, or drugs, or slavery issues going back generations. So there's going to be unpalatable origins of funds.
I was given a book by a guy called Ed Conway, who works for Sky News, who does economics, and he was looking at all the things that we extract from the planet. So for each ton of fossil fuels we extract 6 tons of other materials. So sand, diamonds, all these things for our batteries,
Yeah.
So actually humanity really needs to have a reality check.
Yeah, there is no perfect, is there? So we've gone from micro and species to the macro and economic stuff. In the bigger picture of climate and nature, what do you think the role of an estate like Holkham is? What can you do and what do you hope to do?
So long-term landed estates have a real responsibility, and they need to look back at their past endeavours. So when they built the large houses and created the big parklands, they were done because this is the right thing to do. This is what we want to do.
What sort of duration do you, the principal house, over what period was that built? Do you know?
What, the time from footings to completion? It was several decades. But
we don't have the patience for that anymore as a society, do we?
No, but the great thing about building nature is actually you can build it quite quickly.
You can. It comes back fast.
So I think that so I sit on something a group called the Estates Business Group, which represents about 1 million hectares, and they suddenly were getting nervous about land use change. I said, come on, guys, all of these estates, their entire lifetime, which is
when have you not had land use change?
They've always been doing it.
Yeah.
We've just been sucked into the policy. So that when the Earl of Leicester decided to reclaim the salt marsh and put pine trees on sand dunes to prevent sand blow, to then create this wetland that was fundamentally food and agriculture, and then it went into cultivation for a period through policy, is now a functioning wetland, which is visited by millions of people. So actually, the visits, the millions of visitors a year actually provides the estate with a significant proportion of its income. So actually, all of you other large private landowners, think of what your forefathers did and actually replicate it in a time where we do know that there is more pressure on land and resources than ever. You have a legacy opportunity here to implement and enact meaningful long-term change. So a friend of mine in Sussex who repurposed his estate, he spoke to his son, who was only about 10 at the time, saying, I hope you don't mind, this is what I'm going to do. And his son went, I think it sounds brilliant. So then if we look at the economics of the estate now, which are significantly better than trying to produce food on poor soils, actually it's more robust financially than it has ever been. So don't be afraid of change. Yeah, the early adopters there's sometimes winners and there's sometimes losers, but actually change gives you opportunity, and opportunity makes a difference. And if the difference is unassociated income streams, you've got to think more broader than just actually I grow food, I sell it. I grow nature, I get a support scheme. Actually, I grow nature, I provide somewhere for people to come and visit. I sell stories. We sell stories to individuals. I influence other people to be bold and innovative in their land use.
With every single responsibility and hat you wear, you've described like 3 full-time jobs. How do you look at your time and calendar to make any of that possible?
Well, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning,
Okay.
and I have Holkham weeks and Holkham days, and then I prioritize. You can be constantly going to conferences, and so you prioritize actually what is going to be more meaningful.
Do you have a presumptive no on a conference? Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to Groundswell. I think Groundswell is a hotbed of innovation and communication.
I prefer every other year. I think.
I didn't go last year.
Yeah, I think when you go, it doesn't change that much in a year, I don't think. But in 2 or 3, it's quite good.
I had quite a busy time in the publication of my book, so I was doing a lot of that. And I just took a back step and just to reevaluate.
Do you have anyone who supports you with diary and calendar, or is that all you?
It's all me.
It's all you.
That's when I'll make diary cock up. This is my fault. When you arrive a day early or a day late.
I mean, a day early is fine. You can style that one out. A day late, a little bit harder. I think I'm a bit.
In this day and age, and making use of technology, you've got to be able to manage your diary. I'm just very conscious when I have a conversation, I agree to something, it goes straight in. So and if I need to drop it, because of something that more interesting.
So do you plan 100% and recognise some of that will drop away as opposed to leaving gaps and spaces for things?
So I was speaking to an estate manager recently who said there's one day a week where there's nothing in the diary. I said I can't afford that luxury. It's full on. So
do you think about the week in 5 working days or 7?
7.
Yeah, me too.
So yes, there is the working week, but there's the catch-up weekends.
Yeah.
So so this weekend I had a catch-up weekend, and then that enables you to function during the week.
I calendarize Saturday and Sunday as well, and family calendar and things like that. That's been the biggest thing for me. I'm a geek when it comes to systems and processes and trying to work in that way, because you can just lose days and weeks of being inefficient between stuff. So I have a book recommendation called Buy Back Your Time by this amazing guy called Dan Martell, and I run a lot of his systems and processes in terms of ways of working, but I think it lets you get 50% more done than if you weren't organising.
Also, as a leader, as a team leader, whether you're a management, senior management, director, CEO, and I went to an event 2 years ago where the CEO of Marks and Spencer spoke. And this was someone that knew all the detail, all the way down the entire business. And that he demonstrated to me a CEO that actually enabled giving other members of his team the autonomy, but also that the reporting back to him gave him the detail. So every CEO should know, what the person on the ground is doing. And the reason I go out in the mornings is I can go and speak to my team who might have been there late at night and say, actually, that was great, but if you just do it like this, and actually then we'll see the results from that. So it's managing your time, but if you're passionate about what you do, just every day's a work day.
I want to take you back to Holkham. There was a topic that we didn't touch on the way past. So you mentioned about the 1 million visitors a year that you attract and bring in. How do you balance the revenue generation, the desire to have more people access the land, but managing the risk that comes with that, be it health and safety, be it... We had Charlie Courtney, the Earl of Devon, on the podcast, and he spoke wonderfully about, and in fact his maiden speech in the House of Lords was about pro-public access to private land. But on the flip side, he also spoke about the vandalism, the fly tipping, the damage. He had IRA bombs buried in his wood. He had a sheep beaten to death with a baseball bat on his front lawn. Both of those things are true. How do you balance those parallel challenges?
So about 20% of Holkham has open public access. And how do we balance that? Yes, you put all the safety measures in place. Holkham employs peak summer maybe 300 to 400 people. So you have people that are welcoming and guidance and trying to an explanation. Yes, there's a bit of signage, kind of a slightly aversion to signage, but I know it has a place.
I think I have the aversion. I haven't quite got to your level of acceptance of it yet, so I'm still a pain when it comes to signage going less, less, less.
And so I'm just in the process of putting up a load of posts on different parts of the reserve that are just a QR code, so that there's no sign. After COVID, we all know what a QR code is. We have good connectivity there, so you can actually take people on a journey. I did say to the marketing team who helped me coordinate it, I said, we can say if you've been to all 10 QR codes, you'll get a reward. So you get them out and about and they
Got a little
experience
game in
nature.
it.
And the reward is actually you did 10,000 steps. So we bring nature to people. So really important from my perspective that people are aware that the site is of high value nature, but they've got to see it. So do you know Bill Sutherland? Bill Sutherland's a professor of ecology at Cambridge,
Okay.
and he came and visited in the winter, and he said, "You really annoy me." I said, "Why, Bill?" He said, "Because I wrote a paper on how flighty widgeon, the small duck, how flighty they are and are very sensitive to disturbance. Yet you've got widgeon next to your car park that are 2 feet away from people because they've just become relaxed about it." And when people can see nature at close quarters, that's why the RSPB and the Wildlife Trust succeed so well, because they bring nature very close to people. So we're trying to do that, but at the same time, we have areas where we have tranquility, and I think we strike a nice balance. I did an investment, a natural capital investment with someone Holkham already has a relationship with, and spoke to their sustainability person, and that was a really difficult conversation, to the point where I just spoke to the CEO and I said, "This is what we're going to do. This is how I'm going to measure it. Let's have a 2-page memorandum of agreement, and I will report back to you." They're absolutely fine. We'll do it. So we repurposed a bit of arable land into in-your-face flowers, with 6 million people that drive down that road. Before, they couldn't see the field before because there was a high hedge, so we cut the high hedge down. So suddenly people's connection to the landscape, which they hadn't seen before, to one of my colleagues said, "I hadn't seen that view," and I said, "Oh, you wouldn't done, because it was hidden from you." So as we drive, because of the policy of the Enclosures Act, where all of our landscapes are hidden, so if you can open up the landscapes to people, and access takes multiple forms. Access might be walking through the pine woods or walking on the beach, but it's also visual access from the train, from the car, through social media. So there's, we can, the friend talks about equity of access and how we deliver that. So Patrick Galbraith has just written a book about called Uncommon Ground, and he talks about access. And the Right to Roam lobby have been quite unreceptive to it, but he talks about how we can protect nature, how we also provide access, and how we can deliver it not in the traditional sense where you go wherever you want, but if you guide people and you give them opportunities. We know that most people don't walk that far, so you get in your car and you park and you provide a nice boardwalk, or you provide a hide that is within an area, and you might provide some sort of beverage opportunity. Then people sort of congregate around those areas. So then the wilder, more inaccessible areas, you intentionally don't provide those pathways. Someone was talking to me the other day that there's one landowner where they call it the muddy trainer bit of the path, where you have this wonderful constructed pathway that might be granite or stone, and then you get to a really muddy boggy patch. So the white trainers go, "No, no, don't want to know that." But actually, you go 100 yards past that and you get a wonderful track.
And the people who are happy to walk it and have bought the boots or the gaiters, they know how to treat and respect the
Exactly.
land.
So antisocial behaviour following COVID, it was pretty grim. So when you have 6 tents, loud music and partying on a sand dune on a summer's weekend, that wasn't great. But when I have the guys that, on Sunday morning, I was 5:30 going onto the reserve, and these 2 guys came out, quite clearly been camping, because they still had hot sausages in their pan. But it was like, we didn't even know you were there. You went, you got in, you were sensitive, you took everything away with you, and you came out early morning. And those people that you don't see, it's not the problem. It's the antisocial behaviour and the disrespect of nature on some people that access the land. And there's always the bad apples.
I agree. So we mentioned some of the pristine environment you've got. and the coastline's really special in terms of where you are. But like every aspect of the environment, it's under threat. What are some of the things you think about in terms of managing the future of your coastline?
Sea level rise is an issue. So we have all these sea defences that following 53, the big flood in 53, where there was 300 lives lost in Norfolk. So we know Norfolk is susceptible to that. Some of the modelling from the EA is actually we're probably all right for 100, 200 years, but we still have these tidal surge events. So I'm currently in a very long-winded conversation about putting a 2-foot bund on a sand dune, constructed with sand, that will protect us based on the 300-year tidal surge event. I'm just trying to, which will protect the freshwater marsh, will protect some of the Holkham's income generating assets, have full support from Natural England, the guy on the ground. I have a planner that says shouldn't be a problem, you might be able to do this under permitted development rights. And then suddenly everyone's saying, no, but that might affect the shoreline management plan. I look at the 12 key objectives of the shoreline management plan. It actually meets all those objectives. So apart from part 3 of the planning and infrastructure bill, there's some really positives. And I don't know whether you've read the Corrie review.
No, I haven't.
So the Corrie review instructed by this administration, which actually enables us to put things in place that will better safeguard and improve nature. So if I want to do a constructed wetland and do land use change with wetland, I need to do a plan permission, and then I need to do mitigation. Oh no, there's water voles there. I might kill a water vole, but if I'm going to make the habitat for 400 water voles, come on, guys.
We had a nightmare in Yorkshire with Natural England whereby they designed woodland planting habitat restoration scheme across a 500-acre farm that we purchased. They designed it with us. They then objected to their own scheme because they didn't think it was ideal for curlew. They came back and said it would benefit 400 further species, but it might not benefit curlew. So we interacted at the senior level of the organisation. We also worked with the Woodland Trust, RSPB, Wildlife Trust to talk to them, and they were like, well, here's the answer. And I had the senior management saying, look, we can't get the local team to work with us on this. And it's the reality of, you need to think about things holistically, long-term, wide range of species, not just one.
Yeah, and so it's the one bat, one newt sort of scenario. We re-meandered, working with the Rivers Trust, 5 kilometres of chalk stream, put
Nice.
it back in the centre of the floodplain through Johnson Green Recovery money. The grant was 400,000. 200,000 pounds was spent on permissions, consents, and licensing. Imagine if we had 400 pounds on re-meandering the chalk stream, we could have doubled the length of it.
During my time at the Environment Agency, we had one flood scheme whereby the entire budget for the scheme was gone on planning, consultation and documentation before they broke ground. The scheme never went anywhere.
So one thing that the Corrie review recommends is trusted operator status. And the National Trust are trying to pilot that with DEFRA's approval and Natural England's approval, and that could be a game changer. So you don't have to jump through all these hoops. So Holkham has Section 35 approved body status to manage the SSSI. They got that in 2017. When I arrived, I had a management plan that was 6 years, well, a 5-year management plan that was 6 years old and hadn't been signed off. So I said, give me a year's grace, let me create a management plan. My management plan is as vague as fuck, because it just allows me that flexibility to be able to do what I want. One thing I omitted from my management plan was planting a hedge. So I then had to get, the RPA, so I applied for a capital grant through the RPA, and they say, have you got permission from Natural England? I go to Natural England, I've got Section 35, I can do this. RPA go, we don't recognise this. So if we can get all of the agencies to speak to one another and say, okay, oxygen conservation has trusted operator status, they can be dynamic and innovative and managed on their approach to managing land and making nature better, then you give them that status.
That segues beautifully onto part 3 of the Planning Infrastructure Bill. What do you think?
I think there's significant room for improvement. I think that build it and they will come, but you've got to build it before you remove it. It's as simple as that. You can't allow for, the replacing an ancient woodland because you want to put a motorway through it. That woodland's 600 years old. You can't just plant a load of plastic tree garden and say, job done.
No.
You know, and that's, you know, back to putting a value on nature, because the ancient woodland sites per acre are probably, I don't know, let's say £20,000. I don't know, £7,000.
Yeah,
So their value is very low.
exactly.
There's part of the problem.
And there's also a big flaw with the Woodland Carbon Code. So it's done some amazing things, but the absence of recognition of ancient woodland, rainforest, mature trees, because strictly speaking, in a rational model, you'd say, wonderful, cut them down, plant a new tree, we can claim the carbon credit on that. No one wants that. When calculations and things are done, there's never an assumption that the trees are there aren't going to be anymore. We needed to really recognise the carbon that was being sequestered by those trees over the last 600 years. They should be even more valuable, because what they offer in terms of habitat and biodiversity is just incredible.
It comes to a problem I have a rich and diverse site that is delivering.
Yes, you do, yeah.
But
High baseline.
No value.
Yeah.
And no one, and I can't, so I go to the public sector for my income, but actually because the private sector going, no, I want to see the increase because that's better on my annual report.
Yeah.
And I can't do that.
I wrote a pair of articles that was the polluter pays principle and what happens if we actually enforce that. Well, if that by logical extension works, then surely the protector should profit. So it literally like called out a hypothetical estate like yours and says, well, hold on, there should be a payment mechanism. And my view, this always should be private based, not government, because I want a much smaller government and a significantly smaller public sector.
I was speaking to Tony Juniper, who comes and visits periodically, and we talked about, so how do we create this nature market? And I then also spoke to Mariam Spain about the possibilities of a nature reserve. I co-chair the NNR Advisory Board to Natural England, which represents.
Is there a board you aren't on?
Which represents 1% of England. Well, last week I was I sit on the Species Reintroduction Task Force with DEFRA, so I kind of have fingers in lots of pies.
You're a very patient man.
And how can we? I think the way to leverage private money is through taxation and tax benefits. So if you're Tesco's and you've got £1 billion worth of profit, and you're paying 50% on that profit, what if you were to put 1% of that into nature and only pay 40%?
My worry is the inefficiency of everything that moves through the system. So if you see that going in and out of Treasury and it moves...
I get that. It's back to the £400,000 where only £200,000 are spent on delivery. Back to the nature investment fund that's being proposed. And if that's worth £1 billion a year,
it's a horrific
what
idea.
Is going to get to the delivery on the ground?
So Tony's done some great stuff. We've had him visit, and we had him visit midway through. He was getting a load of public pressure for being an environmentalist, and it was like, he's not subtle about this. Like the guy stood there wearing like a Greenpeace T-shirt, going, "I'm an environmentalist." And but Tony might be an environmentalist. Yes, he's telling you he is. I think he's doing great for that organisation. However, my personal experience of working with Natural England and the Environment Agency is slow, laborious, far too many people doing not enough. We need to shrink the size of those organisations, and putting more money into them, as much as they would like it, is not going to help. Things will slow down, they'll reduce in pace. That's what I worry about part 3. I worry that effectively the government have seen it as an opportunity to get the private sector to pay to resource all their quangos. And they can create more jobs there because they want to see a bigger civil service. It's just going to slow everything down. I think it needs to be significantly smaller. There's thousands of people in those organisations that we would not hire in a private capacity because they wouldn't be prepared to work as our teams do. And that's the problem with...
Well, I've only worked for the private sector, but when I send an email at any time after midday or to the public sector on a Friday, I just get out of office.
Yep. And that comes back to our point at the start about being investable in the sector. Up until this is the first year where universally, I think, we've had environmental organisations recognising the word investment means the investor wants a return. Before, they just assumed it was a gift.
No, they thought it was philanthropy.
Yeah.
And actually, so this is the quandary that I sit on a weekend and think about is, what is the return? And you in the conversation with you, what is the return on investment? What is their expectation? So in the conversation with Ewan, we want a 12% return over 15 years. How does that look like? Is that financial?
That's challenging.
That is challenging. It's because we haven't got...
I have more of a challenge about the 15 years rather than the 12. So I think the way of delivering a return, it's your point earlier about the environment bounces back quickly, and from a low, if you've got a low baseline, now your situation is different. You've got a very special estate, and we've got a couple of those in the portfolio that, in a natural capital sense, don't offer that bounce back. But where you've got it, because for the first time in the sector, time matters. Are you a cricket man? Would you understand a cricket analogy?
Try me.
Okay, so the environment sector used to be test cricket, slow, laborious, take your time, gentleman's game.
5 days.
It's now T20. So as soon as you talk about an investment return, it's over time. So it's how much can you return and as fast as possible. And that's where you need the impact, the disruption. You can't just say, oh, well, you take a year that can take 2 or 3% off your return profile and take it from a successful investment to a terrible one.
What I struggle with the finance. So if I buy carbon credit for $50,
Yeah,
I don't know what the market.
I mean, it won't be a very good credit, but okay.
Yeah. But if I buy it for $50, I've purchased that, and that carbon is stored in perpetuity. How does that carbon value increase, and how can I pass it on to someone else if I've already bought it?
It's no different from a watch. You could buy a watch. So your Rolex sponsorship deal that's going to come, that watch, you can hand that on to someone in the future, and if it's rare and there's less of those, it'll increase in value. So prime example, our oil company that called me yesterday said we want 1 million tons of carbon a year and we need that by 2030. I said good luck. Right. You can't have those in the UK.
That's where I think there's more value in nature, because I can see that increase very rapidly.
Yeah.
So if I go for sites that aren't delivering, sites that have a real opportunity to deliver, actually I can give that return. But if I look at biodiversity credits, are you familiar with Replanet?
Yep. Yeah, we're doing a pilot with them as well as Credit Nature.
So I did a pilot with Replanet last year, going through their Wallacea tool.
And does that align closely with the tool you've built?
There are similarities, and so my tool is similar with a suite of options within natural capital.
It'd be really good to get our director of natural capital, Chris, to chat to you about your tool as well.
Because the frustration with, and speaking to Max, who was leading the project, was, Max, it's cost me £10,000 to go and do a biodiversity baseline on this piece of land. And that's got a score that you've created, and it's got a score of 30. I then can't go to the private market to see the uplift, my percentage biodiversity uplift on that score for another 5 years to then see a credit that I might be able to trade. I've spent £20,000 and I've got nothing back. That's quite, whether it's £20,000 or £200,000.
And you've got your 5-year loss of value on that as well. So it's not, so your investors, if it had come from them, you're at minus 8% or whatever at that point.
So for me, that, I like the tool, 100 man hours to go through their tool. I like some of the AI options. So instead of having an ecologist who comes to review your land, they come when it's pissing down rain and blowing a gale, and they wonder why there's no bees or butterflies. So that tool then uses AI, where you were doing quadrats and transects and sending that back to the ecologist who sat in an office. So I like those opportunities. So I see elements of that I can use in the tool that we're trying to create. So the Merlin app,
Yep.
Everyone loves it. I'm deaf as a post, but I now, using the Merlin app, walking through the marsh, I can identify 5 warblers. Now because the Merlin app, my hand-eye association and listening association, I now can hear a Cetis warbler or a sedge warbler or a reed warbler, and I identify that. So that's learning and that's engagement. And that's what the tool that I'm trying to create is, to allow people to see nature. And I go around, if you drive around with me, I'm spending the whole time saying, marsh harrier, yellow tip, orange tip, because I'm just pointing that, because I find it exciting and enthusiastic to see nature.
Love it.
So it's just, if we can get more people engaged with nature and see some of the positives, that's a win.
Where are you on soil carbon as a concept?
As a concept, my frustration is how it's measured. So it's measured. So I visited a farm in Dorset, similar soil type to Holkham. Met the farm manager. So we said, "What's your organic matter?" Is how you measure your carbon. And he goes, 20%. I nearly fell off my chair. How the hell are you getting that? He said, well, we're measuring it at 5 centimetres in the middle of June. So there's no continuity, because we measure at 30 centimetres in mid-February, where we get continuity of moisture. And we can't get anything above, 0.5% on our soil type. If I look at salt marsh, which sequests as much carbon as a rainforest, if I do a soil measurement on that today, if I had done that 30 years ago, I'd have got exactly the same result. But it's sequestering carbon. So it doesn't allow us to see, it allows us to see improvement in depleted soils, but doesn't allow us to see improvement in, the ancient woodland that is still sequestering carbon, although it's slowed, but it's still sequestering it. But the science doesn't recognise that. Farmers talking about well-grazed pastures and saying well-grazed pastures can sequester more carbon, but the tool doesn't allow that, or the metrics don't allow that. So I get kind of frustrated with it.
We so James is part of our natural capital team, and we're looking at it. We remain very sceptical at the moment. It's one of those that if the codes fall into place and people are more robust about the science, I'll be delighted. We just don't feel comfortable putting a number on it yet, so we haven't recognised any.
I'm 100% with you.
Yeah.
Salt marsh, the salt marsh code. We've done, like everyone else, we've done a carbon audit on the estate. We've identified that agriculture is our biggest emitter. And then when I say, we could have said actually we're carbon neutral because we've got woodland and salt marsh, but we didn't. We excluded those from our scope 1 and 2. Didn't go down scope 3. We're all a bit nervous for scope 3. And so we speak to Agricalc, who were doing the carbon assessments. They didn't have one for salt marsh, so they were just using grassland as a proxy. So we then have growing maize for cattle or for an AD plant. Because there's a cover crop in front of the maize comes out as a better crop. And I'm going, how the hell does that work? So yeah. No, there's lots, we can find lots of faults with it.
My recognition that this is an innovative hotbed for natural capital inherently means not all of it's good.
But that's why, the more we can push nature, the more we can get people engaged with it, the more we can tell stories on nature and nature's improvement. And then we see to how we commoditize that, and whether we're going to still have to sit in the philanthropy CSR space for a bit. And then we start to see the supply chain starting getting interested.
I think maybe for a bit. I think ultimately, he met Izzy Milligan. She works at Great Yellow.
Well, she moved about a bit.
She has. Super bright lady. She was on the podcast and she said the sheer number of NGOs in the environment sector is an example of how bad the environment is. And it's one of those things where someone says something and it's been hiding in plain sight and you don't realise it. And I was like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. And that led to a chapter in book 2 actually about how I think natural capital is going to be terrible for philanthropy, because ultimately we'll get to a point where you can say to your potential donor, well, you could gift us that, or actually there's a perpetual investment vehicle here where you can invest. If it provides a return, you can say the return keeps going and going.
And that was a conversation with Ewan. So I can get, I'm quite happy. I just want capital investment. So the philanthropist goes, yeah, okay, we'll invest. Sorry, I thought it was a turtle dove. No, it's a collared dove. So I can provide you a really nice, sexy story.
You're not as deaf as you claim to be with that recognition.
It's the low notes are fine. It's the high notes I have problems with. So I don't need revenue income because I can get unassociated income through people. But if you invest in this and you want to, and that makes you feel better, and we can report back to you periodically as in whatever way, shape you want, is that sufficient? But I think there is the opportunity for, because we haven't cracked the revenue income from private sector yet.
Do you think that situation you describe, do you think there's a lot of estates that are in your position whereby they've achieved diversification, so revenue-wise they're happy year on year, but they'd like the capital investment?
We're subsidy junkies. That's the problem. Our revenue has been agricultural support, agri-environment. We got some bit of capital to make things happen. we did see some changes. There's these sudden subtle changes where you had maintenance of freshwater grass for breeding waders, also creation was, let's say for argument's sake, £600, but maintenance of it was only £400.
Yeah.
It costs more to maintain it than create it. So we did see a slight change in some of the wording.
I love your terms of like. I literally had a similar thing about how the way grant funding works for NGOs is a drug, and it's such perverse behaviours because they're in a position of chasing annual cycles of money every year, and they're so predicated on people's roles, and
They
it's just
employ bid writers.
they do, yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You've been incredibly generous with your time. I know we've got a hard stop to work to, but is there one question I haven't asked you wish I had?
So I'm not quite like David Attenborough, where I haven't got long, but
How old are you?
I'm 55, just 55. I fall into a new bracket. I used
Congratulations.
to be in the 44 to 45, 55 to 44. In my whatever I've got left, so let's say I'm 2/3 of the way of my time here. What do I want to see? So I know I've made a difference. I know when I've planted flowers and the flowers have gone because the policy says we don't want them, but the verges are full of the flowers I planted. So there's something, I've left something there. So I think I want to know, I don't think I'm going to fix it. I don't think we're going to radically, some of the targets we've got, we ain't going to hit them. 30 by 30, that's a strap line. 15 by 30, brilliant. I love it because it showed progression and movement and change. And interestingly, if you look at the policymakers that in the land use framework launch, where the Secretary of State said we want 9% increase by 2040. Well, if we're currently at 6%, then that's their 15. So you then get the support of the policymakers. So I want to know that when I depart, that actually it's Father's Day yesterday, day before.
Yeah,
so I want to know that my children live in a better place than I did. That's the goal.
I think if they listen to this, they'll be very proud of what you've achieved so far and what you're going to achieve in the next chapter. Mate, thank you. Absolutely loved having you part of the podcast. We've got to do this again. Thank you.
Pleasure.